Hey guys, Jeff Francoeur here. Thanks for listening to our content, and please like and subscribe. Jeff Francoeur here with Pure Athlete. Before we get to today's guest, I want to share with everyone that we have our first partnership with Booster. Now, Booster is the high school sports #1 athletic fundraising for teams and groups. And their owner and CEO is a good buddy of mine. Go to church with him and a great guy. And instead of me telling you what it is, I'm going to bring him on. So Chris Carneal, thanks for joining us.
Jeff, thanks so much. So excited to sponsor Pure Athlete. Love your message, love your vision, love the heart and the values behind it. I'm a former college athlete. I'm a coach of my boys and my daughters as well, basketball and baseball. And our company I started 20 years ago, we work with schools, K through 12, and we serve them by raising funds. The past 20 years, we've raised schools, teams, and groups over $600 million, and we want to continue to serve more schools. So if you're interested in hearing how we can come to your sports team, your school, or your group, choosebooster.com.
Again, go to choosebooster.com. Chris, thanks for being a part of this. A big supporter of youth athletics, high school athletics, and we're looking forward to a good partnership with you, man.
Absolutely. Love what you guys are doing. Look forward to serving and helping schools raise funds.
Yeah, so we just had a great conversation that you're about to hear with a super guest, Dan Orlovsky. Mm-hmm. And man, he had a lot of great stuff to say.
He's awesome. You know, I've told you last 2 years, him and Matt Schaub were real close. And I've been on a few golf trips with Dan now and got a chance to meet him, and he's so passionate. You know, it was cool to hear the story with Damar Hamlin when he prayed, and being an outspoken Christian like all three of us are. It's cool just to see someone stand up for their faith like that. And courage. Not really care what the repercussions are. I'm doing it and I go. But I think he had so many good bullet points with little things. But the one thing I loved was, and you'll see it at the end where he talks to parents about, you know, control what you can control for your kids. And I think that's so important because in this day and age, I love what he said. You can't, you know, you're only going to grow to be as big as you can grow. You know, you don't control that, but control effort and all that. And I think it's great for kids to hear that. I know my kids need to hear it.
I really liked, I knew his story, but he really went in depth in terms of, especially in the NFL, when he kind of realized what his role is going to be as a backup and then coming to grips with that. And then kind of the lessons that he learned from that he applied later in life. I think it's really, really good stuff.
Yeah. And he said he's got 4 kids that his oldest are triplet boys who are 11 years old.
And they're crazy.
Yeah. So he's just getting into the whole coaching and up his kids and all that stuff himself. So it's all very relevant.
Well, and you know, I know you got twins.
Yeah.
We've talked about it before with Dan, because he said that's the tough thing that they're getting into. And he didn't say it necessarily on here to the extent, but you know, if you have 3 kids, one's going to rise above the other, and you know that, and it's trying to balance that as a parent. But I think, you know, one thing I did love to listen to Dan too is because, you know, we do this all the time. We say, we're not telling you to be soft. We're not telling you not to get on your kids and make them better, but I love how he said you push them through certain things that they can actually do.
Yeah,
it's not things they can't do, and I love that, because I think too many times these days it's, you know, hey, it's okay. You know, we actually, it's funny, we had a softball tournament the other day, and girls played great in one inning. They made 3 or 4 errors, and we looked like the Bad News Bears. And you know, my wife asked me what I said, you know, and I went out there and she's like, well, you need to encourage them more. And I'm like, what do you want me to tell them? They're doing great. You know, I wasn't mean, but I'm like, we need to clean it up. And the thing is, if you know they can do it, you're just challenging them. And I think that's what Dan said.
Yeah.
How'd that tournament turn out? You haven't talked about it much.
We ran the gauntlet 4-0, fought home the gold medal.
Wow, I never would have.
It was all my coaching.
You've really been quiet about that. You haven't really mentioned
you know.
anything about this at all. You know, it's really great.
No, but you know, I think it's fun too. And I tell you, it's cool that Dan took time to come on with us, because you got the draft and everything going on this week.
Yeah, this week.
He's a little busy.
Well, he's a great guest. Hope you stay on and listen to the whole podcast.
Please.
And if you haven't listened to all of our other episodes, we've got a YouTube channel out there. If you don't get a chance to listen to the entire podcast, we've picked the best moments from some of these podcasts, and we're laying out a couple of them every week. So check us out on YouTube, click like or subscribe. We'd love for you to subscribe. but a lot of good stuff out there to help parents, coaches, and kids be inspired to do sports the right way.
Well said.
With that, we ought to roll right into the episode.
Let's do it. Welcome back to Pure Athlete. I'm Jeff Francoeur, along with Brad Williams and Britt Lee. And guys, I'm excited. A guy coming on today that's become a buddy of mine, and he's obviously all over ESPN as an analyst, but went to UConn, played football there, a Husky, and is a father of 4, but even a better guy and a great role model. Dan Orlovsky, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you, man.
I know you're not busy right now, so.
Yeah. In between shows, I'm surprised when you said went to UConn that you didn't throw in like played women's basketball there or something. But and that probably would have had a little bit more sticking. But I'm good to be with you, bud.
Thanks. So before we get going, just kind of tell us what you're kind of up to these days, besides obviously the draft coming up.
The draft takes most of my time nowadays. Like during the springtime, it's a little bit lighter for me schedule wise. ESPN is on basically all day long for people's television. So like we have the opportunity to be a part of a bunch of different shows, but the draft's a ton, but just hanging out with my kids, kind of being a part of their lives as much as I can right now and enjoying that and trying to play as much golf on my own. If I'm not working and I'm not with my kids, I'm trying to hit the white ball as much as possible. I also live in Connecticut, so it's like, the roll the dice weather up here in April and May. So
Well, speaking of kids and speaking of youth sports, that's what this is all about. So I'm going to start it off. What is your best youth sports moment?
Oh, man. I'll give you one good and one not good, right?
Perfect.
Because I think the not good sometimes is just as fun as the good. The really good one was I was playing Pop Warner football, and I was at this time where it was like, this kid can throw, but he's not really athletic, but he's got a really good arm and he seems to have a good head on his shoulder type of thing. And we were playing Stamford, Connecticut. I lived in a town, Shelton, Connecticut. So Stamford's a really very athletic town. There's a lot of good athletes that come from Stamford. My town is just a little bit more of a hardworking blue collar type of town that you kind of just go through. But we were pretty rich with pride in football. Long story short, 12-year-old year, Pop Warner, we go to the state championship game and I throw a touchdown pass with 20 seconds left to my, at the time, best friend to win the game, pandemonium, all that stuff, ton of fun. Then I was actually a better baseball player as a kid than football player. And we were playing, I was the 12-year-old that was better than everybody. Threw gas, hit 1,000 home runs, all that stuff. We were playing a town from Rhode Island in the regionals to go to Williamsport. And in that regional tournament, I had 2 no-hitters, 2 perfect games throughout the process, whatever. We're playing this team from Rhode Island. I'm through 5 innings, 15 strikeouts. We're up 1-0. Top of the 6th starts. Strikeout, walk the next kid, perfect game, gone. Next kid that comes up is a lefty named Mark Lewis. I had never given up a home run in Little League. First pitch, opposite field dinger. We go down 2-1. I'm on the mound, devastated. Get into the dugout. I'm sitting there. I'm sobbing, just uncontrollable. My boy, Mark Martiri, sits next to me. He's like, dude, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. He's like, what are you crying about? I'm like, I just blew the game, man. He's like, no, you didn't. I'm like, Mark, I just blew the game. He's like, no, you didn't. I was like, Mark, I literally just blew the game for us. And he looked at him and he goes, yeah, you did.
So Dan, let's talk a little bit more about your youth sports life. So you said you played football, you played baseball. Did you play anything else? And kind of take us through your journey, when you started, and maybe what it looked like through high school.
I played basketball as well. Baseball was my first love. I started playing baseball probably when I was about 4 years old. I was that kid that was in the yard, throw it up to yourself, hit it as far as you could type of thing. I had 2 older sisters. And I think right around the age of 9, I started to play basketball and football as well. And pretty quickly, it was like I could throw. I was a pitcher in baseball, started playing football at 9, played flag football. I didn't love football right away, though. I wanted to quit one of my first days of flag football practice because I threw and a kid slapped my arm and I'm crying in the parking lot. And, I was thankful that my dad never let me quit because my dad was like, no, give it another try type of thing. But played, for the most part, football, baseball, basketball for like the 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old world. Was better at baseball, like I said, but super competitive. I was a good athlete. Like, what I mean by that is, like, I could pick up a ball and I was going to be okay at everything. I was very unathletic. I was tall. I was lanky. I was not fast. I could not jump. I had no power. I was kind of like me as a sport kid, essentially. I ended up stopped playing basketball probably around like 6th or 7th grade, and I just was football, baseball. And as I started to play football more and really focus on playing quarterback, I started to fall in love with football more just because I loved playing quarterback. I loved being the center of attention. I loved that pressure. I loved that feeling with teammates. And I started to get okay at it. And then going into high school, still played baseball a little bit, but I was, like I said before, really good at 12 and very average to below average at 13 at baseball. And like baseball started to dip and football started to surge for me. And in my town, I was so fortunate to be around some people in the football world. Like, it was a really prideful football community. And I kind of started to look up to, as a freshman, like the seniors in high school football. Like, they were like my role models essentially, and looking up to them. And from there, it kind of took off for me when it came to like football and my football career.
So you had various offers out of high school. What made you want to stay home in Connecticut?
Yeah. What happened was, like, my sophomore year of high school, my dad came to me. It was like, you got to make a decision on one of these sports, football or baseball. And all my boys played baseball, all my best friends. I went into my room that afternoon and I flipped a coin and I was like, heads football, tails baseball, lands on football. And then that was my sophomore year. So play varsity my sophomore year. I do okay. And then my dad's like, we got to make highlight tapes, fire them out. Junior year, camps, all that stuff, offers start coming in. What made me want to stay close to home at UConn was I wanted to play early. Like, that was a big deal to me. I wanted to go in and play early. I wanted to play. I'm not a person who could just sit. UConn was just starting to become like a Division I program, and everyone that was around me, family, friends, people in the state, thought it would be crazy for me to go there. They were like, you'll never do well there. You're wasting your career, all that. And I was just, at that time, very motivated by proving people wrong. And the Coach Edsel, Randy Edsel was the head coach at that time. I remember sitting with him, and Jeff knows this with like the recruiting process. Coaches would promise stuff like, you'll come and be the starter. Like, and Coach Edsel never promised me anything. And that was just very endearing to me. And I wanted to prove people wrong. And I felt like he told me the truth, and I wanted to play. And it was like one of those things where when I made the choice, my dad was upset because he thought I was like selling myself short and, scared of competition. And I just remember going to him like, hey, if you think you've raised me the way you think you've raised me, like, you got to just trust that I feel like this is the best choice for me.
Speaking of that, you talk about your dad and raising you. Did he coach you in anything, or was it always kind of just your mom and dad were there to watch?
My dad coached me in like the controllables. My dad didn't necessarily coach me in like on the coaching staff, but pretty early on, work ethic and character, who you hang out with, became a really big deal in our house. I'll be honest with you, and like it strained our relationship big time, especially during my teen years when I was, hard-headed and egotistical and whatnot. But, it was like very, very, very important. You were going to work for what you got. You were going to earn everything. you had to go about that and understand that that was the only chance. And so I remember two things that, like, as far as like that work ethic started to become a big deal, was I wasn't allowed to go play with my friends, like even go kick it with them, until I did a workout. Like my dad was like, if you want to go hang out with your friends on Friday afternoon, you will work out first. I hated it as a teenager. I hated it, but it was huge for me. And the second thing was, I remember him coming home from work one day and being like, did you work out? And I was like, no, I was scared to death to lie to him. So I was like, no. He was like, well, some other kid is. And you can't think that you're going to be better than that kid if he's working out today and you're not. And I think those were really two impactful things when it came to that from my dad.
Dan, you talked about some of the seniors on the high school team were your role models. Growing up, who were some of the athletes or college or pro or even local athletes you kind of looked up to? Who are your heroes?
I loved Elway. John Elway was like my favorite player ever. As a kid, like it was Elway just because I loved the number 7. I loved the way he played. The kind of like the toughness that he exuded was one of my favorite aspects. I loved Larry Bird. I'm from Connecticut. I was a huge Celtics fan. I loved Larry and how tough he was and how confident he was. To be honest with you, like Glenn Foley, who was a quarterback at Boston College a long time ago. Yeah. Boston College was like my dream school. He was a favorite of mine as well, but Elway was probably like the biggest star.
Hey, Dan, I want to go back to something you said a couple minutes ago, and you touched on character being a big thing that your parents instilled in you. And character is one of the things we've defined as one of our 5 pillars of a pure athlete, something that kids need to work on and develop that, is going to help them on the field, but also in life. Can you just expand a little bit on what character means to you and how that plays out, on the field and off the field?
Yeah. I think one, character doesn't happen over a short period of time. Character happens over a very long period of time. I think character is something that first starts to be developed and understood by kids during failure. Like I feel, we are in a time, when it comes and it's not the kids' fault. I think a lot of us blame kids for it. Like kids want everything right now because we live in a society we get everything right now. Like when we were growing up and we needed to figure out who the 22nd president was, we had to actually do something to go figure it out, And nowadays, again, not kids' fault, they get that information. When we are going to go, oh, where's your game today? It's in this town. Boom. Okay, well, we're there. Where back in the day, it was like, okay, we got to go get a map. We have to. So our kids are watching us do that.
Well, they rode
nowadays,
horses. They rode horses to the game.
Yeah.
It was carriages.
Sorry.
Even nowadays with like, oh, we need more paper towels. Great, cool, Amazon, bang. Our kids watch us do it, and so they think it instantly happens. And that's just not how sports happen, and that's just not how life happens. We have experienced it. So I think like character is something that you can only get when you experience the things that you don't want. Character is something you can only get when you're around people that are not like you. Character is something you can only get when you're uncomfortable, and you're forced to go through things that you don't want to go through or go and experience. Character is something you can only get when you do difficult things. And I think it's one of those things that it's almost like you have all these different vantage points that you get to experience things from, or hear things, or see things, or watch things from. And then you have to go through them yourself to kind of build that character up and experience what that's going to be. I think simply put, character is who you are when no one's watching type of thing. I think it's also like who you are when you get necessarily what you want. I think it's got a lot of different definitions.
So, I want to talk about this a little bit because we know bad characters kind of easy to identify, and you can be successful in sports and not have good character. I mean, we see examples of that. And so we're trying to promote to kids, why it's important to develop character. You're a quarterback, you're a leader, or you're in a position that has to lead and be unselfish and all those types of things. So, it seems like to me that, in order to lead other people, you have to be a person of great character. Does that play itself out, on the football field?
Oh, yeah. I mean, football, I think probably even more so than any other sport because it's such a dependent sport. Like if one of the great things about playing quarterback was like I was so aware that I couldn't play as well as I wanted to or thought I should unless you did, and unless you did, and unless you did, and my teammates. And my teammates would never play for me if I thought I was better than them, if I treated them lesser than me, if I thought I could do things that they couldn't, and kind of, I always say this, like one of the great attributes of like, I was around Peyton for a little bit and then Matthew Stafford was those guys were two guys at the same time. They were unquestionable. They knew that they were the guy, the franchise, the $1 billion CEO, but they wanted to make sure that you knew that they know they're not better than you. And I think like that's something that you just have to figure out and truly embody. I think it's hard nowadays to be really good at sports over a long period of time without good character, though. I think it's different than in the past because of social media. Because I think because of social media, if you got bad character, you'll get outed real quickly, more so than in the past. And I also think kids have so much more resources to become better themselves that you'll get caught by the kids who maybe 20 or 30 years ago didn't have those resources.
Who was the best coach you ever played for and why?
Oh, man. Dude, that's one of the things I've been super blessed with is I have had some rock star men as coaches for me. Like it started for me in high school. My high school coach, Joe Benanto, was so great because like he demanded so much of me and he empowered me. I'll never forget my senior year, Jeff. We were going to play. It was like the second or third week. We were like number 3 in the state or something. We were going to play this team, West Haven, Connecticut, really talented. They were number 1. He pulled me into his office and he said, "Hey, the only way we beat this team is if you run no huddle plays at the line of scrimmage." And so then he was like, "I want you to take these tapes. I want you to study their tapes. Tell me what they're doing on defense and the plays that you're going to call and come back to me on Wednesday or Tuesday." And I remember being like, "What?" Like and that was such an empowering moment because I was like, "Oh, he trusts this team to me." And like, that was a huge moment for me. And it's like, but he demanded it. And we went for first play of the game, no huddle. And it went from there. So I think it started with him. I think I had a strength coach, Chris Anderson, who in high school, he was just great at motivating and being a part of it with us. Coach Edsel was great for me at UConn because he didn't give me anything. I got an FFFB, a 0.67 GPA my freshman year fall in school. And he called me into his office. Yeah, super smart guy. Why'd you play quarterback? Because you were smart. He called me into his office and he was like, "You ever get below 3.0 again, you'll never play quarterback for me again." And that scared the living daylights out of me. And then I'd probably say in the NFL, 2 guys that stood out were Jim Caldwell and Gary Kubiak. I thought Coobs had this incredible understanding. I don't know what your experience is, but like I feel great coaches set a standard and then understand that each guy needs different tools to achieve that standard. And they figure out what tool that this person needs or whatnot, and they help him get that. So I think Coobs was great with that. And then Coach Caldwell was just so awesome because he was such a believer in like building more than just the athlete, more than just the player. He was really about like building a man and the wisdom of that. Like I said, dude, I've been super fortunate with that stuff.
Dan, we talk about, role models for our kids and different things like that. And I know there was an instance for me this year that turned the whole football world upside down. Obviously, all of the sports world, for that matter, with Damar Hamlin. And, you went on the next day and openly prayed on TV, and we're three believers here, and how cool that was. Was that something you thought of, or did it just come to you at that moment?
No, I thought about it. I was traveling when the game was happening on Monday night from a college football game. It was like taken aback because everybody in the airport was glued to the television, but no one was talking. And the same on the plane ride home. Woke up the next day, and I was like, I kept hearing thoughts and prayers. Our thoughts and prayers go out to him. And that's great. Like, I don't want to minimize that. But in the moment, sometime in the morning, I was like, someone should just pray for the kid. Like, someone should just pray for him. I'm kind of tired of hearing people say thoughts and prayers. And on my way up to work that afternoon, I was pondering, I kept feeling it on my heart, like, just pray for him. And I called the producer. You're in TV, so I called the producer and I was like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to do this type of thing, but I'm thinking about doing this. And he was like, our producer is great. He's like, listen, you do you. Like, you be yourself. I'm never going to change that or take that away from you. Do me one favor, because I was on with Laura Rutledge and Marcus Spears that day, and he was like, if you're going to, give them a heads up. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to, but so a little bit before the show, I called over Marcus and Laura. I'm like, yo, guys, I'm thinking about doing this. I don't know if I'm going to. I'm probably not. But it was on my heart, and they were great. And the show's happening. And I'm thinking about it. And then all of a sudden, I get scared to do it because I know prayer is not for everybody. I'm aware that I'm on television, certain networks, all that stuff. And right when I got scared to do it was when I had this moment where I was just like, just trust God. Like, just trust God. And I did it. And, it was the response has been amazing. Damar is healthy, back playing football, which is amazing. It was a really cool moment.
Dan, let's talk a little bit about the NFL. And you made a comment earlier about that's very cool, by the way. I don't want to minimize what you just said. Sorry.
Sorry
for the
bad
insensitive
segue.
guy over here. I appreciate that story.
Sometimes it's hard for me to get a question in, so I was like primed, trying to do that. But Jeff. But you talked about earlier, like you hated. You went to UConn. One of the reasons you went to UConn is because you wanted to play right away. So in high school, you were the guy. UConn, you were the guy, and then you get to the NFL, and it's like it seems like I don't want to put words in your mouth. You answer this, but like every day you're probably struggling to am I going to be part of this team? Are we going to have an opportunity to play? Yeah. And yet you played for 12 years. So what do you attribute your ability to like bounce back, your ability to reset, your ability to motivate yourself to be in the NFL, to be in the top league for 12 years?
Yeah. I mean, there is a little bit of luck that it involves. There is. To play that long, you just have to catch a break or two. I think the part of it was when I first got to the league, I was like every other kid that goes to the NFL. I'm going to play for 10 years. Like that's just your belief. Like, I'm going to play for 10 years. And that often becomes like a downfall because you think you're just going to get that lifestyle, quote unquote, for 10 years without putting the work in. So I was like, I'm going to become a starter in the NFL. And I worked towards that every single day. I was like, eventually my window or my opportunity is going to come and I'm going to be a starter. And then 08 comes, I get to start a couple games for the Lions. We're terrible. And I play okay, but like we go 0-16, so I was like, what's the future for me after that? And Gary Kubiak calls me up. He was with the Houston Texans, brings me in, and I get like an opportunity to go to a place that like was good. I had friends there, good coaching. And Coobs called me into his office one day, and he was like, you got to learn to be patiently impatient. And again, being young and dumb, I was like, what do you even mean, dude? Like, I just want to get on the field with decent supporting cast. He's like, you got to work every day in an impatient mode. Like every day you have to be impatient for your opportunity, but patient enough to know that it will come at some point and you just don't know when. And you want to be ready for it. Like because you're going to get one shot. And eventually I ended up getting a chance to play a little bit with a better supporting cast. And I played well. But this was like my 6th year in the NFL now, which is double the average length. And I play good. I throw a couple like game winners. We win a couple starts. And I immediately go, the NFL is I'm going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, right? That free agency period is coming. Free agency comes, and the NFL made it very clear that I was not a starter. Just with the money that I was being offered, they were like, you're a backup quarterback, dude. And in that moment, it was like this transition in my mind of like, okay, dude, you can either keep this career going for a long time and accept your role and be absolutely nails in that role, or you can disagree and you can mope and pout and you can complain and you can say, I wish I had this shot. And I kind of like made the commitment like, all right, I'm going to go sign to be a backup quarterback and I'm going to be the best one in the league. Like that was my mindset. I was going to impact the organization. I think like, what happened was as a backup quarterback, the opportunity to prove that you're worthy of your job is minimal. You got 17 games. The likelihood of you playing is slim. So how do you impact your organization when there's only 53 jobs? How can I impact that organization to prove I'm worthy of that role or one of 53 jobs when I don't get the chance to do it on the field? I'm the only person on the team to do that. That became like a focus of mine.
How long, when you talked about that realization, how long did it take you to come to that point where you were at peace with your new role? I mean, was it something that was an overnight kind of realization, or is it something you really struggled with and fought, internally on and prayed on? Because we're talking to a lot of kids and parents with this podcast who are facing those same kind of decisions. So how long was it something you wrestled with, or something that really came to you quickly that, hey, this is my new role?
It came pretty quickly to me, but I think the reason it did because that didn't change me. Like I was so habit driven and I was so everyday, like present driven. My favorite part of being in the NFL was the locker room. Like I loved it. I loved being around the fellas. That's kind of like what I was born to be a part of. Also like that it was at this time when, I was with buddies. Like I was with a buddy of mine, Matt Schaub, and Jeff knows him. I don't know if you guys know him, but like I could see Schaub was better than me. Like there was just this moment where I was like, oh, Schaub's better. He's a better player than me. And, it became pretty quickly because I was like, I had known him. He was a friend. He was better than me. How can I be the best for him? And I found value in that. I really did. Like I loved it. Like I embraced it and wrapped my arms around it. And I think I played for another 7 years after that. So, I kind of embraced it.
What's cool about that though, Dan, is, obviously me and Matt live in the same neighborhood and talk a lot. He also took a lot of what you did for him and did it for Matt Ryan years down the road for 4 or 5 years. And I think that's cool how he was able to kind of piggyback. Plus, you're a lot better golfer than he is now. So you really kind of got the W after everything.
Yeah. I mean, standard is low on that, though. As long as you don't hit 12-6 curveballs off the tee box like him, you're going to be okay.
So, Dan, I got to think, there's some great life lessons in that story, in your story for kids, because even kids, don't necessarily get the role that they are hoping for, might not get to start. But you embraced it and tell us, tell kids what good can come out of that. What are the lessons you learned out of that have played out in the rest of your life?
Because that's everyday life. That's just the reality of everyday life. We wish we could change it, and we wish it wasn't like that in many ways, but it's just the reality. I've got my kids myself right now. My kids are like, I've got triplet 11-year-old boys. And so they're very much like the beginning phase. they play sports. They love sports. I have a 7-year-old daughter as well. Like they're at the beginning phase of like the sculpting that sports kind of can do for your character and your spirit and whatnot. And all their friends are. So we're constantly having conversations about this stuff. And I will constantly use my own examples to them. And, some of the things that we stress in our house. And this is like almost the last couple months, I've always told them effort and attitude, effort and attitude. And I think like the difference between, and this might be different for Jeff, like the difference between like nowadays, I feel, and maybe when I was a kid was like, I have to make sure my kids understand why effort and attitude. Not just, hey, effort and attitude, like why effort and attitude, why it's important and why, like being the first person in those lines are a big deal, why being present matters, why you have to put in hard work. One of the things I say to my kids all the time is, guys, there's 8 billion people on the planet. You telling me you want to go play college baseball means nothing. Like I tell them like that. A lot of kids want that, bud. What are you willing to do for it? And, because sometimes my kids will say to me like, yeah, but dad, like you were the best player in your town at 12 years old. And I tell them in baseball, but I wasn't in basketball and I wasn't in football. And, like I had kids who were better than me that I had to go work out against and whatnot. And some kids, were better than me and helped me, and some kids didn't. And I think that like the lessons that come from the journey of the sports are so much more needed now for kids because of the pressure on them, because of the expectations on them, because of social media, because of so many different aspects of youth sports. So I think that like you can become you can have such an advantage as you get older in sports, and why that matters. If you are using sports instead of allowing sports to use you, if you're a kid.
Yeah, finishing up here, Dan, a couple more questions. We just want to hit one with the draft. Obviously it's coming up, and, our people like to listen to a few things that are, going on today too. What about the draft and the quarterbacks, and how does that whole thing usually work its way out? Signability, what you want?
Well, as far as like when the kids go, or what like,
yeah,
what do
you don't
mean
see
by
a
that?
lot of quarterbacks drafted in the 3rd, 4th, 5th. Like it almost seems like you go in the 1st round or maybe a late pick and they're gone.
And his NIL had a lot to do with this year's not many folks in the back end of the draft that are quarterbacks.
Yeah, because a lot of kids will stay in school for another year because they can make some money out of it and kind of transfer from one school. Transferring a lot easier as well. So instead of trying to go make a couple dollars in the NFL, they can stay in school and probably make more. The quarterback position is so different nowadays than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you were searching primarily for the thinkers and the intellects and the guys that can operate your offense. Nowadays, because the kids are so talented, you got to be a 3-way quarterback. You got to be able to beat kids or beat people with your mind, your arm, and your legs. And, because of players like, Elway a little bit, but even more like Michael Vick, and now to Lamar Jackson, to Josh Allen, like the best athlete on the field, they're putting the football in his hand. And those kids are developing into quarterbacks. So I think like the physical talent is so much greater nowadays. You're going to see, a kid that's going to go number 1 in the draft is 5'10", 200 pounds. And then a kid who's probably going to go 10 picks later is 6'4", 250 pounds. And they're both incredible. But they're incredibly athletic. And so I just think like the position is constantly evolving. It still has its foundational pieces, but it's constantly evolving. I want to answer something though real quick, Frenchie, because I probably I wrote some stuff down in regards to like the youth sports stuff that I think kids can learn from a little bit more. Now I'll take like 2 minutes to share it because I think it is important for kids to hear.
Go ahead.
Yeah, like I think with sports nowadays, I think number one, kids can use it to prioritize improvement. Sometimes we obsess too much with result, and I think sports forces you to prioritize improving because it doesn't happen overnight. And if you just see where you start and you make the commitment to yourself to just improving, you'll see such a growth about yourself over time that isn't just attached to sports. It can be in any aspect of your life. I think sports allow us to become very self-aware, and I think kids need that nowadays. It's very self-aware, like things you do well, things you don't do well, things you're not good at, and that's okay. I think kids nowadays need to embrace some of the flaws that we all have and understand that that's like it's normal. They're not different because of it. I think it teaches kids how to become prepared for things. Like you in sports, if you're not prepared, you'll get exposed. And it's the same in business. It's the same in relationships. It's the same in life. And nothing in the world can teach you that stuff besides sports. I think teaches kids to be present. We all need probably to be better at that. But again, because of technology, like it teaches you, it forces you to be present and kind of be where your feet are, not only physically, but mentally, and being very in the moment. I think it teaches us to be sponges of other people. These kids are all playing together, and this kid's really small but quick, and this kid's really big but slow, and this kid is super tough but not a good teammate, and this kid's he needs to become tougher, but he's a great, I think we could become a sponge. It teaches kids to kind of pull from each other and make the best version of themselves. And then I think probably my favorite thing about sports more often than not is there's no entitlement attached to it. Sports is like you roll the ball out there and, who's better, and you don't deserve anything until you put the work in type stuff, and you don't have a chance unless you do. So I wanted to get that in. That's kind of like the things
awesome
that I love
stuff.
about sports
No,
nowadays.
No, and I love that. And that kind of honestly leads me into our last question before we hit you with some questions, some quick things. But what would be I love that for the kids. We talk a lot about parents, and parents get out of the way sometimes. Let your kids go play. What's your best piece of advice to parents watching this that have young kids and they have aspirations for them?
Push your kids in the controllables. I do not believe we should not push our kids. I absolutely believe you have to push your kid. But in the things that they can control, you can't control how big, fast, tall, powerful your son or daughter is going to be. 99% of that is out of your control. So stop pushing it on them. But you can push how much effort they put in and set the standard and expectation level and make sure that they know that. You can push them in what they're like as a teammate and what's the standard and expectation level of what kind of teammate that you expect them to be. Always assume the best in your kid. Always assume the best. Your kids have enough people in their life telling them how much they suck. They got enough people. They got friends. Their friends are going to tell them they suck at times. They're going to hear it from other people's parents. They're going to play against other kids. There's going to be enough people in their life to tell them the things that they're not good at. Make it an effort to understand how important the things that you say to your kids are. I'm not saying lie to them. That doesn't do anything. But your kids will become in many ways the words that you can speak through them. And it's okay to push them on the things that they can control, but let go of the things they can't. You don't think they want to be really good? Of course they do. In our country, sports are glorified, so they want to be really good too. But you can't force that upon them, especially in the things that they don't have any control over. So I think it's okay to push them to things that are in their control.
That's perfect, man.
Good stuff.
Great
Good
stuff.
yeah.
Great stuff.
Well, we know you're busy, man. Know you're getting ready for the draft. Don't screw up, by the way. I'd hate for you to get the order completely wrong.
You know me, I'm not notorious for making mistakes in public settings. So.
Oh, God. Well, thank you for joining us, Dan. We can't appreciate it enough, man.
Yeah, thanks so much,
you.
Dan.
Of course, man. Good to be with you guys. Thank you.
Hey, guys. Jeff Francoeur here. Thanks for checking out Pure Athlete, and subscribe to our channel on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you go to listen to our podcast.